and welcome to Two Girls in a Pod. I'm Sharon.
I'm Christy.
Hope all of you are doing well. One of the things is we've talked, and we've been doing the little series on health and stuff like that. And, we decided to change it up. And one of the reasons is we were back in Alabama, where your mom is from.
Yes.
Went down there, did like a little mini work vacation kind of thing. So that was good. But unfortunately, while we were there,
my aunt passed away.
And so we thought this might be a good time to, do some work on death and dying and, that whole process, because it is such a process, but it's such a different process for everybody. And finding, where you fit in those processes, where your beliefs are, and all of the different stuff that comes with that, because it's, it's not always a cookie cutter fit for everybody, because of religious backgrounds, beliefs, culture, and the list goes on, and people's concept of death and what happens. Some people think nothing happens. You're just dead. You're dead. Some people think you are reincarnated. Some people think you ascend to heaven, and some people think you get stuck in purgatory for a little bit of time, or some people think that you transcend all of this and become part of everything else. So there's so much around this whole process of death. And so we thought we would talk about that. And we thought our first episode would be talking about what that experience has been like for us on a personal level.
Right.
If you're fortunate to not have those significant people die, then great. That's a wonderful thing. I mean, yeah, I think we'd be hard pressed today to have that, but it does happen. There are some people I work with and they'll say, this is the first significant death that I've had. And, they might be in their 40s or their 50s, so it does happen. But let's start with you, because, your significant death for you, I know your grandparents had passed away and stuff like that. And
I was really close to my great-grandmother. And so I would say that was the first experience that I would say was very impactful.
And how old were you?
I was 18 when she passed away, and it was difficult for me. I was young, and I don't feel like that I handled it, with much ease or grace. I feel like that I beat myself up a lot because I didn't go back and see her as she was getting ready to pass. My family made a trip back. She was back east, and my family made a trip back to see her, but I didn't go. And a lot of times I kicked myself over that, and I think that we have a tendency to do that. But the next significant loss I experienced was my dad, who passed away in 2007, and that was extremely difficult for me. I felt like my world fell apart. So, and just not even because I didn't understand how that would impact me. I had no idea and was totally unprepared for all the emotion and anger that I would experience with that. So it was a really difficult time, and it lasted a really long time. And even now it's, that's 15 years later. It is true that time can help, but you always miss that person.
And we talk about that. We miss the vessel. We miss because you miss being able to sit next to them, see them, all of those kind of things. And I think, in particular, I think for you is because I don't think sometimes we know that those people are so significant in our lives, but you don't know how significant they are even within that family structure.
Right.
You might have a perception of that person, and then, when they pass, it's like, holy cow, sometimes they're the glue that holds the system together, and you don't realize they're the glue because your dad was kind of quiet in some ways, and
he was very quiet. And so I always saw my mom as, really strong and she was more vocal and things like that. And so through that process too, like you say, sometimes you don't understand what place that person holds in the family structure like that. And I realized that my mom, she made a lot of decisions with him being the voice of reason a lot of the time. And so when he passed, I realized that I had a skewed idea really of what the structure was. I thought, like I said, that my mom was more strong and the vocal one. So I didn't realize what kind of stabilizing factor my dad was for her. And it felt like it became chronic indecision and things like that after that for my mom.
And I think that's what it is too, is, you talked about that. It was a long process. So it was kind of a difficult time for you and in our relationship. And I think what compounded it more was the timing of things. That's when I also got meningitis. And part of it was as we were going back and forth to Alabama to see your dad during this time. I was still working. And so I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. And my body finally said, okay, enough.
Definitely. It was a stressful time for both of us. And you were supporting me, and I appreciated that, but you having to take the family medical leave to be able to be there with me and all of that. And you're right. I think the stress of it all just caught up with you.
And I think you probably could have handled it differently, because I've told her this, because I got the meningitis, it really messes with your ability to think and to do the things. So I couldn't be there for you. And then you had to shift gears and not even be able to process your grief and loss, because you went right into really helping me and really at one point feeling like you were going to lose me as well.
Yeah, helping you through that time, because my dad passed in March and you were sick at the end of April, and they couldn't determine whether this meningitis was bacterial or viral. And that was really important to know, because they didn't, about how to treat and just how desperate the situation was. But you had some times where that we weren't for sure. So it was really hard going through that, just dealing with that loss and then not knowing what was going to happen in your situation.
And then, of course, 7 days in the dark because I couldn't have light on, and you stayed with me in the hospital the whole entire time. And just that feeling once again of being at a loss and alone and stuff. So there's so many things that can compound. And, oftentimes we'll think, well, it's just the death. But, there's so much more that is happening, because life is still happening even when that death has occurred.
And that was one of the things that I struggled with big time, because somebody that was so important to me was no longer there. And I could not understand, you're sitting there and you're talking with somebody, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And I couldn't understand how life could just continue on as if this person was never there or something. And I don't know where that thought comes from, because obviously I had my dad in my life up to the age of 30. So I was blessed in that way. I know a lot of people don't have that experience, but it seems so strange to have such an important person in your life gone, and how everything else is supposed to just stay normal.
It's funny, because I remember talking to my sister Alice, and we were having a conversation, and I can't remember who had passed away. I don't know if it was a grandparent or whatever. And I remember she said that she was at the hospital and they had just passed in that. And she said she looks out the window, and something similar to that. There's this man who passes by in a pickup, maybe blue pickup, whatever. And she said, it's like that guy, nothing impacted him. The world, like life was still going on around us, even though this was happening to us. It wasn't happening everywhere, kind of thing. And I think that's a really relevant thing too, is that realization that loss is so personal in a way, because it's not impacting everybody.
Yeah, and it seems so tremendous to you. It's just so impactful. And for everything else to just go on is just inconceivable.
It's amazing to, when you think back on this, and, I'm really fortunate that, you didn't have a whole lot of grief and loss in your life. I lost all of my grandparents. I knew all my 4 grandparents and lost them. And so that was significant. But my first significant family loss was my brother, my oldest brother. When he passed away, I was at my parents' house. My niece called, wanted to talk to Grandma. I said, okay. I didn't know. And I will forever have the sound of my mom, the wail that came out of her. And I was there like, oh my God, what is wrong? And then I took the phone from her, and my niece told me, and so to hear that when a parent loses their child, because our perception is that parents always pass before their children, which I think is interesting because death happens at any time, at any moment, to anybody. But we want to believe that belief system that children should grow up, live their life. My brother he was older, so he had a family of his own. So that was so significant. And my family, how we dealt with it and all of that. And, one of the things I always tell, even when I do grief and loss work, is to never let somebody die twice. And what I mean by that is my family, my brother still lives. Christy knows a lot about my brother. She never met him, but she knows a lot about him. The nieces and nephews that never met him still know stuff about him. We keep him alive. We don't want somebody to totally disappear. They truly die and cease to exist when we don't remember them. And I think about that like when, if you ever watch the movie Coco, Dia de los Muertos is the day that they remember. So, and it is that thing of, that's why he doesn't want the picture to be gone, because if it's gone, then he's gone and they're gone forever. And I tell people, when I'm dealing with grief and loss with clients, I'll say, tell me, I want to know this person, because it's important to keep them alive, not just in our head and in our heart, but out there so other people can see and experience these people. That is how we keep them from dying twice, and so that's such an important thing. And we talk about your dad. We'll do different stuff, and we'll talk about memories and things like that, which is kind of really cool. And then in 10th of 2014, I lost my dad. It was really difficult because he had broke his hip, and I was actually in session, and one of the people in session was a doctor. And I always tell my clients, if it has to do with my family, I will always take that call because my family is very important. The phone rang. It was my sister. She says, hey, Dad broke his hip and they're going to take him to the hospital. He's going to go to the hospital and I said, oh, okay. I says, where's he going to be at and all that. So he was in a hospital that was only about 30 minutes away from me. And they can hear me talking. And so the doctor, of course, says, well, what happened? I says, and he goes, how old is he? And I told him, he goes, oh, he's going to die. And it never registered. I'm just thinking, well, that's really an odd thing to say. And I'm thinking, my other thought is that your bedside manner? Because I just don't think that. Anyway, we went and saw him. We did all this and that. And the morning that he had the hip surgery and that, and, had started rehab and things like that. And the morning I was driving over to see him, he had passed. And so they kept him there for me because they knew I was on my way. And that was such a significant death for me as well, because I was used to talking to my parents every day. When I lived by them, I'd go have coffee with them every morning on my way to work. And so very, very significant. And then a little over a year, on September 18th of 2015, I lost my mom. She actually went into hospice. My mom had breast cancer, and then it eventually metastasized, several years later into lung cancer. And that was another extremely significant time in my life. But I think that in doing grief and loss work, and I remember when my dad passed away, I took the week off and then I went back to work. And I remember being in a meeting, and I'm in this meeting, and I will always be so grateful to this other clinician who reached out to me. I really didn't know her very well, Patty. She says, let's take a walk. And I'm thinking, I don't want to take a walk. She goes, no, we need to take a walk. And as we're walking, she goes, you're not doing okay. And I'm thinking, well, I'm doing fine. She goes, no, you have the deer in the headlight. Look, you're not doing okay. And so it was one of those things I had to go, oh, wait, what? And really think about that. And so work was always a thing that I could go back to. And I think maybe, sometimes that helps with the process. Sometimes it could slow down a process. I don't know. I think it's just individualized. But then I think to myself, is this like a cosmic joke? Because after my dad died, the clients I got, guess what? Dealing with death and dying. They're like, is this some cosmic joke? You got to be kidding me. And I don't know. I think sometimes the universe puts things in our path that we need. So I really started on a path of really looking at death and dying and the impact of that on people. And so when my mom passed away, same thing happened. I got a few more that were dealing with death and dying, and I've had that, since then. and particularly with, and then we get into the last 2 years and had a lot of that dealing with clients and their losses and things like that. But I think for each individual, we have similarities, but we have differences. And if it's okay with you, if we share the last time with the last part of your dad, because that ties into the rest of how we believe and what the process was all about.
Yeah, I feel like that the experience I had with my dad, so he passed at like the early hours of the morning.
We had just gotten there.
We had driven from Colorado to Alabama to get there, and it was late when we got there, and I got to spend just a little bit of time talking with him. He wasn't able to respond. He did acknowledge me just by like flinching his eyes when I talked to him. I only got to spend a little bit of time with him then, and went to lay down to get some rest, and it was not long after that he passed. And I came downstairs immediately. It was me and you and several others in the room, and we were all standing around, and all of a sudden I have to say it was a very strange experience, but I started seeing what looked like sort of a golden light.
And so I'm going to let her compose. So I'm going to tell you what my experience was going in. When I go in, there's that part that I think that therapist piece of me or the nurturing piece of me is I'm thinking, I get in there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to survey the room. Who will I go to? Let me see what's happening. Because, her younger brother too was there. And so really working on assessing that piece of it for me. So her and I are standing kind of right at the entrance as we walk in, and so we can see him.
And my brother, like she said, he was younger. He was only 10 years old. I think my older brother was there too in the room. And I don't think anyone else experienced this, but I started to see this. It was like a golden light, and it was like it was emanating from his body. I saw it rise up to the top of the room and spread out. And it looked like it had sparks of light.
It was like energy
within it, just filled the room, and it started to go everywhere. And I was literally seeing this, and I was overwhelmed, but also with a sense of peace.
And I think the thing that was really bizarre is I got to experience this as well. And I looked over at Christy, and I could tell she was seeing it too, because her eyes were as big as mine. And that it was so interesting, because as the last bit came out of him, and it came out of like his chest area is what it looked like to me, but it was so much.
It just floated up.
And it just like filled the room, and it was just like there was motion to it. It was the most amazing experience. I'm so grateful that I got to share in that experience with you, and that we both saw it. And I'm in my head thinking, why isn't anybody else like with their eyes in awe and wonder at what is going on here? But nobody ever talked about it. So I think it was something we experienced. Why we did, I don't know. But as I was watching, it's so weird, because I almost seen his body just concave just a little bit as the last bit came out. It was so amazing.
It went up to the ceiling and started to dissipate as it spread out. It was like I was seeing those sprites of light just twinkle as they went out. And it was just, like I said, it was an amazing experience, and in some way, like I said, peaceful. And I am so grateful that I got to see that. And it really helped me to think about how it is when we pass, and what that is, and seeing that energy. I felt like it was his energy, and it was going out and just becoming a part of what I would say is all.
Yes, and I think that is the thing, and I think that really impacted so much. And we have countless conversations about death, dying, energy and that. And we talk about that, and, I always think to myself, when we talk about what has no beginning and no ending, what can be neither created nor destroyed, but can only be transformed. People will say God, but on earth, the only thing that has that is energy.
Yeah, we ended up watching a documentary. I believe it was on Amazon Prime.
Maybe.
I think it was called Heal. And I remember there was a couple on there that went to this group because they were struggling with the loss of a child. And I remember they were scientists. And they had a hard time. They struggled a lot with a belief system, knowing what had happened with this child after their passing. And they talked about that with the energy, and that made sense to them when they put it in that context to say, energy is and always was and always will be. That helped them to understand about their child and that energy still exists.
And I think that's what it is. When we talk and we look at, when your heart stops, what do? They send electrical current. Our heart is electricity, energy. Our brain, the neurotransmitters, electricity. And so I always wonder, and I always tell Christy this, when we talk about, that man was created in the image of God, and I think people think image as in the vessel. And I always think to myself, what if the image is the energy? What if we're that piece of that greater energy? And that is the image in which we are created. I don't know. But I find that after having that experience with your dad, it kind of shifted my thinking about what is this whole thing. But I also I also understand that the brain is electrical impulses. People are not dead until the brain has its last electrical impulse, basically. That's energy. Energy needs a vessel. Energy needs something. And, is it that when we pass, and we have this conversation often, when we pass, is that why there are people who believe in reincarnation? Does the energy go into a child being born? I don't know. I think these are questions that so many people don't have the answers to. And maybe we're not supposed to have the answers to. Maybe we're just supposed to have the wonderment. Maybe we're supposed to be having the conversations. Maybe that's what it is. It's opening up a dialogue. It's expanding our mind to see that there are many options and there are many beliefs and many ways to get to all. And I think that's what it is. It's an exploration. And oftentimes when I'm doing work with grief and loss, I'll tell people, what is your belief system? And sometimes they'll say, I don't know. I don't have one. Well, then that's where we need to start, because you get lost because you don't know. I don't think anybody can profess to have the answers. It's that unknown. And it's the unknown that sometimes scares us, whether it's thinking of our own mortality or that loss of somebody else. But I do know that it's lonely sometimes without that person. There's an emptiness. But, I always I told Christy, I said, at one time I felt like I was just such a horrible daughter. And the reason why is when my parents died, it was devastating to me because I missed the vessel. I did. But it was hard because the essence of who they were, that energy I always felt. I always feel. So it's like the vessel's gone, but they're not. And so for me, my grief and loss was always for the vessel. It's missing listening to my mom whistle, doing gardening with her, my dad, knowing he was up to something no good because the twinkle in his eye. You always knew it.
True.
There are so many things, but I have the memory of those things, and I'm grateful to the memory and to be able to pull that up. And you can pull that person right back up into that existence in that moment from that past. But we can't go visit them in person. And that's what we miss. We miss that piece of it. But I found that I didn't have, when I would talk with my clients about grief and loss, or my friends and family and just different people, my heart was heavy. And this is the piece. My heart was heavy. I was devastated. Once again, because of the missing of that vessel, the missing of that person, the tangible person. But in my mind, because I believe their energy goes and stays. It's everywhere. It's big. That I feel my parents. I feel that energy. So I felt like I was supposed to be more sad. I was supposed to be sad longer. I was supposed to do all these things. I was supposed to do all this. And I wasn't. In some ways, I wasn't. I was, because I was feeling them. They were gone, but not gone.
You still feel their energy, and that was a saving grace for you. I understand that you beat yourself up at times because of the way other people experience grief and loss. Maybe you thought you weren't doing it right, and you didn't want to dishonor them because you hold such importance with them, that you don't want to lose that. And just because you don't experience grief and loss the way that other people do, it's really a blessing because you can still feel their energy with you. And I'm reminded of one of my favorite Disney movies, Moana, and that relationship that she has with the grandma in that. And I love that
She always
movie.
gets emotional at this point. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care how many times we watch this movie. And I understand why, because it's an emotion. It's a very significant emotion.
That energy is always there with her. The grandmother talks to her and she tells her, there's nowhere you can go that I won't be with you. That's what it is that energy of that person that they can, if you can feel them, it's comforting.
And I think that the thing is I think that sometimes we were in Nueva Vallarta, and this woman's talking with this, and she'll just tell me stuff anyway. Anyway, she had lost her husband, and she wanted so bad to feel him, so bad to know of his presence. I said, okay. And as she's talking to me, and she's telling me these things, and one of the things that stuck out in my head is they had a favorite song. It was I just lost the name of it. But anyway, there was this kind of celebration. She didn't want to go, and they finally convinced her to go. The fans said, just come. It was after her husband. So she goes, and they have a mariachi band. As she's leaving, the mariachi band's coming in, and they're playing that song that was their song. She walks out. And I remember looking at her and I go, well, that's a really odd song for them to play at a celebration. And because the type of song it wasn't one it didn't fit with. And I said, the problem is sometimes those messages, those people are there with us, and sometimes it's in a song that's out of place because it's significant to you. Sometimes I feel like those energies are there, but we're so stuck in our grief, or we're so busy looking everywhere else, we're not experiencing what is there.
Sometimes we can become so fixated on the loss that we can't see or experience some of those things, I think.
After my mom passed away, I was having such a hard morning, and I was getting ready for work, and I was just really missing her. And in my head, I'm having a conversation with her, just so you know, I'm just like, Mom, I just miss you, and I'm having such a hard day. And I said, I miss feeling you. And we had those lights over
the vanity. There was a row of lights over the mirror.
And all of a sudden, those lights started doing this weird pattern. Like the first light would go 1, 2, then it would skip the next one, go 1, 2, 3. Then it skipped the next one, do another one, then it come back, and it did this really weird pattern. And at that moment, I felt my mom. And it was like, I've got you, baby. It's okay. I'm here. And I remember having that feeling, and I was there like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I went to work feeling much more complete. And fast forward, I'm in my office. So the chair I sit in faces my couch and my love seat where my clients sit, and then behind me is my desk, and on my desk I have 2 lamps. I have lamps on. I don't put my overhead lights on. And I'm sitting there, and I look at my client, and she's kind of looking behind me. And I was just very odd. She goes, Sharon, what energy's in the room with us? Who is that? And I says, well, what are you seeing? She goes, the lights. And I go, oh, it's my mom. And I turn around, and it was that same pattern that my 2 lamps were doing. And my client goes, oh yeah, I feel that. And we went on with our conversation. It was the oddest thing. But she goes, Sharon, I experienced that. She said, it's very strange. And I said, and part of it was she was very open. She was very, her grief and loss process with her family system, and particularly her grandmothers, who were very, very relevant in her life. You know, she really had the belief system that their energy often came to her at the time that she needed them. You know, and I think that's what it is. It's what your belief system is. And not everybody's is going to be the same. We're sharing our experience. It's not to minimize anybody else's or to maximize ours. Every single human being has their own experience with grief and loss. Everybody. But I think the thing is it's how do we learn about what it is for us, even on an individual level? And then from that individual level, share that with somebody else. How do we do that? Help others. You know, we're going to talk more in another episode about, you know, what do we do for other people? How do we help through grief and loss and stuff like that? For us, you know, and I'm very grateful because you've been such a strong support system for me. You know, I wish I was better support system after I got over the meningitis, but that took me so long. And I think that is, you know, for you, that really is what kind of springboarded you into from grief and loss. And this is important. If you do not deal with grief and loss will morph into things like depression. And then it's a different process to get you out of a depressive state than it is to get you out of grief and loss. There are two different ways because something almost gets more solidified. And so for you, you didn't really have that support.
Yeah, I felt really alone at that time, and it was such a struggle that, yeah, I did fall into that depression, and it was really difficult to get out of.
And it was difficult for me to identify it as depression. It took me about 6 months to really recover from the meningitis because it really affected my memory a little bit at that time. So it was very difficult. I didn't have energy. I didn't have stamina. I couldn't have those really clear-cut thinking. It was all kind of a fog. And so for you, I know that was really difficult because you did feel very alone. And so it wasn't until about 6 months out. And by then, a lot of that had already, you know, started to morph into that. And part of it was because not having that support to deal with that grief and loss process. Because I know you didn't do it with your mom because you knew she was going through grief and loss, and you would kind of put yours on the back burner, you know,
to help you through that time, and
but also to help your mom. And
yeah, because my mom came to stay with us after that for a little while too. You know, her going through that process as well.
And I think that's what's hard too, is, you know, in grief and loss, and you know, once again, and I tell people, don't make major decisions while you're in grief and loss. You know, don't make any major decision for about, almost a year after that loss, so that you can think more clearly, because so much of the time it is emotion that drives those decisions. And then, you know, after a year, you know, when you're thinking more clearly, they're like, holy crap, why did I do that?
Yeah, you can make some huge decisions and then find yourself thinking, maybe shouldn't have done that, or that maybe wasn't the right decision to make. And it's because you're just in such a heightened emotional thing that you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people, you know, take time. Give yourself time. Give yourself all the time you need to heal, but not to stay stuck. The healing process is, once again, communicating, addressing those feelings, all of those things that are important. And once again, we're going to talk more about that. But that, I think, is something that we've really learned to do a little bit better. Once again, I do much better at this when I'm not dealing with something that's messing with my brain, because it was only after that we could actually start really to work through this. But it took a while because of the depressive piece with you. But identifying that, and then you also identifying that, yeah, this feels different. This doesn't feel like just the sadness anymore.
Right.
And that anger over, you know, feeling like somebody was taken from me or whatever, I don't know. And I just think that understanding that in those grief and loss processes, there's so much emotion. And sometimes it's hard to be respectful in those moments. You know what I mean? And not only that, but it's in that moment where you realize that those significant deaths shift the system. And then where do you fall in that system? Because you can lose the system too.
You can lose yourself in that. And that's why it's really important not to make big decisions, for sure.
And also respecting and understanding that sometimes when people say and do things in grief and loss, it is through grief and loss. It is an emotion that is speaking.
It's coming from a place of hurt.
A deep hurt, a hurt that transcends a lot of other hurts that you'll ever feel.
Yeah.
And like everybody in systems, there's going to be hurtful things. And I hear that often. People say, well, they're being so mean, they're doing this, some of the stuff they're saying doesn't even make sense, blah, blah, blah. Remembering that it comes from a place of hurt and of trying to make sense of something that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Making sense, as you said, how does the world go on when something so significant just happened? How do they expect you to? And, one of the things, as I watched my parents go, when they had their grief and loss of the loss of their parents, the loss of their son, realizing that life goes on. Life is for the living. And I never understood that. I would hear that when I was young, life is for the living, and I get it now. And it's hard because it's that thing of how do I go on living when something so significant has happened? And it's that journey each individual has to be on. And once again, there's no right or wrong in that aspect. People will navigate it the way they do. And there's no hurry up and get over it process. For every single human being, it is their process. And I think it's the responsibility of all of us to be respectful of it.
Right, and have compassion and realize that you have to hold space for people when they're going through something like that.
And just having the gratitude for the people who are there for you, were there for you, and knowing that you can turn to them and doing that, taking that time to reach out to those people when you need it. Understanding, and I think that's the biggest thing is I knew I could go talk to you at any time about that, about what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And even when I wasn't talking or you weren't talking, we were in tune enough to know that maybe we needed a nudge to talk.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they are difficult times, and I wish that there were easy, I wish that there was ways to make it easier. And that's the other thing we're going to talk on our next episode about cultures, where some cultures, our way in the Western civilization of grief and loss is somewhat different than other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And, people will talk about, well, we're going to have a celebration of life, and then that celebration of life is filled with nothing but sadness.
Yeah.
And it's like, if this is a celebration of life, how does this work? So we're going to talk about that, but we're going to address that in our next episode about different cultures and how we know that, one of the things is grief and loss is not innate. The loss itself, and, grief is innate, but the process and how we see death and dying is very different. Those are learned behaviors. Those are learned because if they weren't, every culture would experience them the same way. Mm-hmm. Even within the United States, different cultures within the United States deal and handle and do death and dying very differently.
Right.
I remember we were at I think it was my uncle's funeral. It was my uncle's rosary or something. And I remember, oh my God, we were telling all sorts of funny stories and stuff, and we were cracking up. I mean, just because we were actually celebrating his life, and we got in trouble by the priest. It was like, no, this is a day of being somber or whatever. And they're like, but even that gave a message. We were doing it inappropriately. Do you see what I mean? And so there are those things. And
they definitely do impact the way that we look at death and dying. And, so, people can have different beliefs and stuff like that, but there's even, like you say, situations like that. It's, the thought from our society about how and what that looks like, that whole process that impacts the way we truly experience it.
And I have to tell you, one of the things I'm really, really grateful for you, but there's many things, but went to Christy and I asked her if she would sing at my mom's funeral. And I know that was such a difficult thing for you because I know you loved my parents.
Yeah.
I know that, remember, this is 22 years later, so almost half your life you've known them. And I appreciate just how Mom and Dad just embraced you in my life. And, you were their daughter-in-law, and that's how they introduced you. That's how they treated you. And
they were always very accepting of me and, just made me feel a part of the family. And I appreciate that about them. And I feel like I learned a lot from them.
But I appreciate the fact that I know that had to be very difficult for you. And then, of course, you then sang at my dad's funeral. And I appreciate that as well, because I know that was difficult for you. And even those things are part of that grief and loss process. And that when we participate in them, sometimes even when they're difficult for us. And
I'm grateful that I could do that for them and for you. But
for my family.
For your family, yeah. It was just, it was difficult.
And this is the thing. Death, for so many people, they feel like it's an ending. But it's not our ending. And that's the hard piece of how do we figure out how to navigate and continue living and realizing it's not our ending. And at the same time, still respecting and keeping those people that are so near and dear to us when we lose the vessel. How do we keep them alive and keep them from having that final death? And it's talking about them. It's sharing stories. I share stories with my clients. My clients share stories with me about our families that have passed, and those things, it keeps them alive. I'm always grateful when my clients allow me in on that journey and help me to get to know those people that were so significant in their life, because that significance matters and keeping them alive. So for us, we do that. We appreciate you guys listening to us as we talked about our journey and what that's been like for us in the death and dying. Next time, we're going to talk about the cultural differences so people understand that there are differences to how we grieve and stuff like that, and that none of it is wrong. It is all right for each of us.
And how we can help others that are going through that kind of thing.
Yeah. What can we do? What can our contribution be to those people who are living and who feel like they were left behind?
Right.
It reminds me of, I remember an episode of The Golden Girls, and this was always just sticks in my head when Sophia is sick and Dorothy is sitting there and she's talking. I don't know if it's like, it might be to Rose, and she's just so upset because she doesn't know if Sophia's going to die. And she tells her, that if she dies, she says, I'm going to be an orphan. And I think sometimes that's what it feels like. But the good thing about even being an orphan is somebody comes along and loves you and nurtures you. And we have to remember, in all of the loss, there are still those there who are loving us and nurturing us and being a part of our lives. So thank you once again for listening. We know this is kind of a little darker and that, but it's not, because there's still life. There's still stuff to have gratitude about and appreciate. And so we always turn to that. And we turn to those memories to help us through those difficult times. Once again, thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to next week.
Bye. Bye.